Don't talk about weapons and you'll get the port is something that was supposedly said between Macron and Hezbollah official. Today we're gonna take a look at an investigation done by a French journalist. Quickly, just about him. His name is, and I just read it how it is, Georges Malbrunot. It's probably pronounced very differently since he's French, but he's a journalist. He's a specifically, I believe, a Middle East responder or a Middle East specialist for Le Figaro, which is a French newspaper, the second biggest newspaper in France, which was something I first wanted to check in with, something like that, just to make sure it's not just some crackpot theory. But it seems like he is someone who is regarded as fairly respected investigative journalist and is working for a pretty big French newspaper. So in basically his report, he talks about that a secret deal that was done by France and Hezbollah that allowed a French shipping company to win a tender at Beirut's port. So I'll just quickly do some of the claims he's made, and then we'll talk about we'll talk a little bit about them, and then what this tells us about the possible French policy towards Israel, towards Hezbollah, towards, let's say, pushing for a ceasefire for a long time. So basically, also welcome to the Daily Objective. Joining me is James. James, I'll go to you in a second. I just want to put it through. So there was, if you remember, in summer 2020, there was that big explosion at Beirut port. So 218 deaths, more than 7,000 injuries, as well as 15 billion in property damage, 300,000 homeless. I believe it was said that it was basically the most powerful non-nuclear explosion that we've at least that we have like on record. What happened is that large amounts of ammonium nitrate stored at the port of Beirut exploded. The reason why that's became a big problem later is it supposedly was that Hezbollah had hands in that it was either Hezbollah's parts of the ports, or Hezbollah. It was basically Hezbollah's who had the explosion there. I don't think they wanted it to explode, but they would definitely want it to explode somewhere else. So something that happened quickly after is, and now he goes into this report saying that apparently Emmanuel Macron pledged to not discuss the issue about Hezbollah's weapons when he came to visit Lebanon soon after. And in return, Hezbollah will allow CGM, which is like a French shipping company, to win a tender, basically win like a competition about who gets to operate the container terminal in Beirut's port. So I'll just quickly finish with this. So as I've said, it's a French shipping and logistics company. They did win the tender afterwards. And apparently the family who owns the port, or the person, first the person who owns the port, Rudolf Sada, had accompanied Macron on his visit to Lebanon. His family is of Lebanese descent and has ties to Lebanon. There's also the fact that this company was one of the first companies to start working again after the explosion. So after the explosion, I believe there were weeks of basically state of emergency from Lebanon, and also suspension of pretty much any activity on the port. But this company was one of the first to resume its practices. And just specifics about the port is responsible for about 60% of Lebanon's imports and 70% of country's customs revenue. So having access to this, having privileged access or preferred access to this will make will be a big deal, basically. So as I've said, this is a report done by an investigative journalist. But let's discuss it in terms of what has been happening in let's say, the last year, but also for a long time when it comes to ties between France and Hezbollah. So, James, what did you first think about when you read this story?
Well, again, to repeat your initial caution and proviso, this is still just a report, although it is coming from a credible source, a major media outlet with an investigative journalist who apparently is credible, and it makes sense. It fits the pattern. But I would just urge people to wait for the investigation to come out before we speak with absolute certainty about what, for example, President Macron may have done or not done, So it is still an allegation in the newspapers, but does fit so perfectly, doesn't it? I mean, would it surprise you? It's not surprising at all. And now we know that Hezbollah's military arm is, as we figured out before the show, military arm has been regarded by the EU as a terrorist organization. And when we're talking about Hezbollah's explosives, presumably we're talking about the military arm of Hezbollah. So if Macron did do this, it seems to me um, pretty awful. The EU regards exactly this kind of thing as terrorism. And I know it was an accident, the big explosion that happened in 2020. They did not want to happen when and how it happened. But it is interesting that Hezbollah was involved, let's put it that way, at that moment with reestablishing that port, which is, as you point out, so economically important, and working with a big Marseille shipping company whose family is Lebanese in origin. Yeah, and this is classic government, isn't it? Capitalism is not government supported business. That's fascism. Capitalism is where the government gets out of business. But when you've got a semi-socialist or socialist situation, fascist type situation, that's exactly what the government is going around doing, is helping certain companies in France. So of course it's going to be a Marseille shipping company with ties to, whose owners are tied to Lebanon. The French president would be out normally to help in this way. This is not surprising in that regard. But of course, getting to the main issue, it's not surprising given France's anti Semitic attitude to Israel. France, the president of France, the government of France has been no friend to Israel. There's absolutely no other way of looking around. It's like when the Biden administration, someone in the Biden administration apparently released that intelligence about possible Israeli response to the Iranian attack. Does it surprise you that there are people who hate Israel in the Biden administration who'd be working for Iran? No. Does it surprise you that President Macron himself is busy working with Hezbollah if it means the economic interests of France? Doesn't surprise me one little bit. Even if the EU has declared that the militant wing of Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, well, no, I'll still be talking with them even after a big explosion. A horrific explosion that killed hundreds and maimed thousands. I mean, that was, as you point out, that was a really horrific explosion, one of the biggest I've ever heard of. And so they didn't want it to happen then and there. But wait a minute, wouldn't we be asking Hezbollah, just exactly how did this explosion happen and what all are you guys getting in and out of that port? No. So Macron has a lot of questions to answer, it seems to me. But it's hardly surprising. That's hardly surprising. The West has had an anti-Israel attitude for quite some time. We don't have Israel's back. All those nations who say Israel had a right to defend itself and then say ceasefire, 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 really hate Israel. And French anti-Semitism has deep, deep roots. We've all heard of the Dreyfus Affair and so forth, but it's much, much older and deeper than that. French anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism in the West generally is a horrible thing. What can you say? It is hard. My initial reaction is this is hardly surprising, coming from Macron, who is no friend of Israel, any more than the intelligence leak, apparently from Washington to Iran, was no big surprise to me. There are people who hate Israel who are high up in the Biden administration. And really hate Israel and want to help Iran. Now, as perverse as that sounds, it's like Macron is actually helping Hezbollah, working with Hezbollah. So long as our interests, you scratch our back on our economic interests, We won't mention any of your weapons. Weapons? Weapons? Well, now, doesn't that sound like he's covering up for the militant wing of Hezbollah, a terrorist organization according to the EU? Yeah, that's exactly what he's doing. He's covering up weapons that Hezbollah would have. We won't mention your weapons. We won't talk about anything that might have been involved that way in the explosion, or indeed your weapons generally. Just give us this contract that'll give us a guaranteed big, fat, healthy chunk of all imports and exports out of Beirut for this one French shipping company. Mm-hmm. That's classic cronyism and corruption, but worse in this case because it involves covering up the weapons of Hezbollah. Now, think about that. Put that in context. We have how many thousands of rockets in the last few months have rained down upon Israel from Lebanon? And that's what he's covering up. The Hezbollah weapons that are now showering down upon Israel. French President Macron covered up the existence of the weapons that are now killing Israelis.
So when it comes to, well, just quickly, James, yeah, Hezbollah is a designated terrorist organization, but only its military wing. So we can discuss deals with the loyalty to the
weapons. That's directly talking about their military wing. We won't talk about Hezbollah's weapons. As I have read the report, was the exchange that was made in order to get this French company the sweetheart deal at the port of Beirut. Covering up their weapons? No. And these are the very weapons that are now raining down upon Israel and killing Israelis and destroying buildings and displacing tens of thousands of Israelis in northern Israel. That's what we're talking about. Macron covered up the weapons that are now attacking Israelis. That was part of the deal. Shh. I won't tell the world about your capacity to slaughter Israelis if you give us this economic deal at the port of Beirut.
When it comes to stuff like this, because you might be thinking, well, we call this episode "How France Profits from Lebanese Terrorism," and someone might be saying, well, it's only Hezbollah, but you have to realize, how do we get to this point? Again, if the report is true, and there was a deal between Macron and Hezbollah, what you have oftentimes, currently Lebanon government is pretty big coalition from what it seems. There's like 5 or 6 different blocks there, and one of them is loyalty to the resistance, which is the Hezbollah's political wing of the organization. And what you oftentimes have in a government is, you guys don't know it since you don't have parliamentary democracy, so you don't have. But what you oftentimes have is you have a bunch of ministries. The biggest party usually gets the prime minister spot. In Lebanon, it works a bit different because the prime minister is always of a specific religion. I'm not sure if I believe it's always Sunni. And then the Speaker of Parliament is, I believe, Shiite or something like that.
They have that all worked out, how the top leadership roles have to be assigned to different religious or ethnic groups in Lebanon. Interesting, huh?
Yeah, and so what you have after that is you have a bunch of ministries which get divided up between the political parties, the political subjects, political movements within the government. And so while you might have a certain prime minister, there is, let's say, a ministry that is basically under complete control of someone else. So you might have what Lebanon has done is basically given a part of its country to Hezbollah. Basically, you get to control this part. I tried to check specifically. It looks like it might have been different in 2020, but currently Hezbollah is controlling the Ministry of Public Works and the Ministry of Labor. And so,
isn't that lovely?
And so what happens is, what these do, they deal with their things. And what they often do is they have, what they do is they run what's called a tender. It's basically like a public competition that is supposed to be transparent. Basically, you just say, hey, government is doing this. If any private company wants to sign up, you can sign up, and we will, depends on how it's done, we will either pick the best one we think for the job, or it might be random for any company that qualifies, which immediately reminds me of some of the corruption scandals from my own country, but I'll keep that to myself
Oh, you
since we don't
think
have.
government contract bids for government contracts are corrupt? Huh, where has that ever happened?
Yeah,
Everywhere.
uh,
Everywhere.
and these things can be done more transparent, but I wouldn't expect that much from again Lebanese, very basically almost a failed state, with Hezbollah controlling parts of the south, controlling parts of the government, and controlling many ministries. So you could have a deal between a president of a different nation and between a Hezbollah politician in Lebanon saying, yeah, if you do this, we will be able to just give you this part.
What is this distinction between the political and military wing of the same organization? No, sure, we share the same goals. We're closely affiliated, but those are the guys with the guns and explosives. We're the ones who talk in, the Beirut, the Parliament of Lebanon. Okay, I don't get the distinction. It's like saying that the Nazi
Well,
propaganda.
yeah, James, don't you remember in World War II, we only fought the Wehrmacht. We didn't
Right,
fight
right.
any.
Not the propaganda people. They had a really complex propaganda organization. So the propaganda people are over here, but the military are over here. The SS and the Gestapo and the German army are over here, but the propaganda arm and all that is over here. Now that makes absolutely no sense. That is insane. So the people whose job it is to talk or write in defense of these military thugs are off limits. It's kind of the bizarre the approach that we take with civilian population being innocent, always innocent. The civilian population must be innocent. No, 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 no. That to have a militant wing means you have to have, like I said in a recent podcast, even more civilians to support the military wing. For every militant, you need several civilians to actually support them, to feed them, to clothe them, to house them, to take care of their medical needs, to build their weapons. So who's shipping the weapons, buying the weapons, making the rocket launchers? I mean, it's not just the people firing the guns. It is civilians who are supporting the people who are firing the guns, and it's these bizarre distinctions we make. So if all I am is a diplomat for Hezbollah, it's no different than saying all I am is a diplomat for Adolf Hitler, or by the way, a diplomat for the Ayatollah in Iran, or a diplomat for Xi Jinping of China. Yeah, they are the representatives. They are helping they are agents of all that is evil from whom they represent. I mean, there's no other way of looking at it. The distinction seems to me utterly bizarre.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. A super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, France loves Hamas. We have another super chat from PC who says, France voted for Jews to be removed from all city of Jerusalem. Definitely let me know what specifically you mean. If you just mean that the basically it has been decided by the UN that that's an illegal occupation of East Jerusalem, then yeah, which pretty much is that. Well, sort of returning to the topic, when I read it, I was like surprised yet not surprised, because depends on how you look at it. It's sort of like, oh yeah, this nation that has been pushing against Israel almost at any chance, that when Israel got attacked by Iran 3 weeks ago or so, they immediately said they will not join any action against Iran. They have a weapons ban on Israel already. They've actively been pushing for a ceasefire, which just means surrendering to terrorism.
Yeah.
So from
Israel, they
that
want to
perspective,
destroy.
so
There's
from
no
that
way of looking
perspective.
at Macron's policy. He wants Israel destroyed. He does not believe they have a right to defend themselves. Lay down and get slaughtered is Macron's official policy. There's no other way of looking at it.
So from that perspective, it's like, oh, this makes sense. This sort of falls
Yeah.
into the line of what. But then I'm like, why is then the UK? Does the UK also have some sort of deal with Hamas or Hezbollah? Does the United States have some sort of deal? Because it's sort of. It's sort of like that meme when they increasingly say like they are getting less and less, and the last guy is like, you guys are getting paid? Because I've been doing this stuff for free. I've been pushing against Israel for free. So yeah, this is
It's
like
like
a
the journalists who are supporting Russia, right? And they found out some of them were kind of on the payroll. But does it really matter? Would they need to be paid? Or were they paid simply because, well, yeah, you're on our side? So you're right. You don't have to have a sweetheart deal with Hezbollah in the port of Beirut to hate Israel. No, many other countries and institutions have proven that, haven't they?
Yeah.
It
Unfortunately, what I think this is sort of like, well, we will push against Israel anyway. Might as well get paid for doing that, which is, I think, what makes this, really disgusting. Again, Hezbollah is no
there.
is a terrorist organization. You might say, well, only the military wing is a designated terrorist organization. But again, what kind, like, what other part of the world you look at you look at like that when you decide, it's only the Russian military that's a problem in Ukraine.
Right.
The Russian
It's
government is
not
okay.
Putin and his advisors in the Kremlin. It's not Putin and his oligarch buddies. No, no, no. It's just the Russian army. Now, can you imagine thinking that if you're being invaded, you're Ukrainian being invaded? No, of course it is the politicians who run Russia who are behind it. Absolutely. It's madness to make that distinction. Absolute madness. By that logic, Hitler was just a speech maker. He wasn't out there fighting. He wasn't out on the Western Front or the Eastern Front of the World War II, was he? He never held a gun in that war. He was a soldier, I guess, for a time in World War I. But during World War II, he didn't aim any rockets at London. He was giving orders for his people to aim rockets at London and to invade Poland and France. But by that logic, Hitler is not a you'd be wrong to go after. I thought that when many people were, for example, complaining about the deaths of Nasrallah or the head of Hezbollah, they act as though this guy was, oh, well, he's, some kind of hero. He's just a politician. He's a voice for the people. You can make all those same arguments for Adolf Hitler, literally the same arguments. But these people are actually an important part, a critical part of the military project, just like the civilians who support them are. It's not only more so. I mean, in my view, if the people who are building munitions or sending food to the Nazi army are part of the Nazi war machine, how much more are the propagandists? Your Goebbels and your Hitler speech make. Okay, they're just making speeches. They're not out there fighting the war. So what? They're innocent? No, they're the leaders of the operation. Come on.
We have a super chat, another super chat, I should say, from PC. Thank you so much. He says, "That's what I meant, Daniel. The UN vote." Okay. Yeah, which is the UN vote, designating
That's
the basically the parts of West Bank that Israel controls as occupied territories, as well as the Golan Heights and East Jerusalem.
right.
Uh,
Once more, they want Israel to be destroyed. They don't care if attacks are staged from those areas. They don't care how even occupied those areas are. It's just take over by Israel, and Israel's evil, and Israel had no reason for taking over the Golan Heights or parts of Jerusalem. What? It's like, are you even paying attention? What you're saying is Israel has no right to defend itself. Just lay down and die, Jews. That's what Macron is saying. Now, to do the secrecy of the deal is it's because he knows he's up to economic shenanigans on behalf of a particular company. It's because he knows that the EU might have a problem with me hiding, not talking about the weapons from Hezbollah. That's why he had to keep it under the surface. But publicly, his policy is really no different, is it?
We have a super chat from Jonathan. Thank you so much. Maybe he's just afraid of hurting his image. No, no, guys, I don't do it just for money. I really do hate Israel. I really do have a problem with the genocide in Gaza. It's not just for this deal.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
just summarizing, this again doesn't come as a big surprise, yet it sort of does, because it's sort of shows that the state of the world we are at right now, that there is a lot of opposition, like really improper opposition to Israel. The only opposition there should be to Israel is for not doing enough
Doing enough, right?
about
Holding their punches,
specifically
listening
Iran.
to Washington at all. Yeah, negotiating for hostages with terrorists. Yeah, that's the criticism for Israel. You guys should be ignoring the West and be doing what you need to do to destroy these monsters out to destroy you. Yeah,
Yeah. And again, this is not some sort of altruistic, well, these nations should support Israel because all of these nations have stakes in the region. As I've said, it's the most clear it is with America, which has been directly attacked by Iran and every single proxy of them. But even with France, when it comes to, I think the barracks bombing also was that French people were there.
41 years ago, French people were slaughtered in Beirut. Yeah, exactly. Along with those hundreds of American Marines. Absolutely. Yeah.
As well as, I believe there were French hostages also on October 7th. I'm not sure if they are still kept there. But again, Israel is not some sort of monocultural place. There are people from all over the world. That's why when the kidnappings happen on October 7th, that's why when you look at the nationalities of those people, you find people from all over the world, because that's what Israel is. It's a people dislike the word multicultural, and it has a bit of a problem with it, but it's a melting pot of the
Um,
Middle East. I mean,
they're
there
French
is
Jews. They're French Jews. And you know how France treats its Jewish population. That's how much France cares about the French hostages that Hamas took. I'm certain, they're Jewish. Are they really even French? Well, Monsieur Macron, a question.
so with that, thank you everybody for joining us today. We'll see where this report goes from. As I've said, this I believe only came out either today or yesterday. I haven't seen yet anyone else reporting on it, or rather, well, the French newspaper, but they only, I think they only write in French, so they've been reporting on this, as well
But it
as
was
some
there,
Israeli
so it's a big newspaper. And if
as
you
well as some
read it,
Israeli newspapers have reported on it, but I haven't seen much more yet. So
but I
hopefully
won't
we'll see
expect the
more.
Western. Yeah, I don't think the Western media is going to pick up and get all moralistic about Macron here. No, it's not going to. It's probably going to fall right off their radar screen just as fast as they can get it to.
But hopefully we'll see more. But as we've talked about 2 days ago, there was a big deal on Twitch. Also, the fact that Twitch has been geo banning Israelis from signing up. Yet no Western newspapers have started reporting on it because some people started getting banned. But no sort of like just a general sort of news has reported on it yet. I hope they'll do better now. You
Hope
know.
someone sees what's going on better now. Yeah.
Uh, and with that, we'll continue on the reality show in just about a minute. We'll talk about Cenk again. He's been on. Cenk Uygur has been on Piers Morgan again with Mossab Hassan Youssef. Now I'm confused because Cenk has been mispronouncing his name the whole time. So now I'm even confused. But it ends with a B. It's Mossab. Uh, so make sure to check us on the reality show in just about a minute, and we'll see you there. Thank you, James. Thank you, everyone, and bye bye.
Be safe.